I define Liga MX as the shoot your shot league.
You do expect higher performances and better things from Club Americas, but it's the inconsistencies.
Isn't this inconsistent though?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Raw Football Show. I'm particularly excited about today's guest. Finally with me again is my co-host Geno, and with us is someone I'm sure he grew up cheering for and someone me and my family love to hate just because he scored so many phenomenal goals against La Selección Mexicana. So with us, Landon Donovan. How are you?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Landon. I'm going to have to talk to you after the podcast and see if you can throw on the Everton jersey and go play up top again because we got a little bit of situation going on over there. So
they need help, man. I know.
But for now, we'll stick to the MLS and Leagues Cup. And, obviously this has been kind of a different tournament, than we're used to seeing. We have the CONCACAF Champions League, but this is different from that. Group stage, Liga MX and MLS, all teams really fighting it to, see who is the best of the best. Let's start with your experience with Liga MX and the few experiences that you've had with them. I know it hasn't been, a ton or it's maybe to the extent that we've seen in Leagues Cup, but what's kind of the differences you've seen between MLS and Leagues Cup and kind of, the styles of play and how they differentiate from each other?
It's a good question. So historically, and I think it's still the case in Mexico, it's much more individual based. So it's much more, there are a lot more just 1v1 moments in the game. When I went to Leon for 4 months and played there, it was, I knew it and I had seen it, but living it and playing it was really surprising because it's not a type of soccer that I had ever played. So their game is much more individual, duel based. And in America and probably most parts of the world, it's much more of a sort of collective team based. So it's been interesting to watch the styles contrast, but I think what we've seen in MLS probably over the last 5 years is the quality of the entire roster. It used to be that you had 3 or 4 or 5 guys who were at the level of a Liga MX team or even better, but the rest of the roster would fall off. And now MLS rosters are so good, and that's why MLS teams are having so much success against Liga MX teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for a while now we've seen there's a bit of a change in progression in both MLS and Liga MX. From your playing days and now as a spectator, how have you seen the two leagues progress, really?
So what happened early on with MLS is we had, I would say, superior stadiums, infrastructure, training facilities, but we didn't have the quality of the players. Liga MX had just better players throughout the league. Lots of good Central American, South American players would go to Mexico and either play in Mexico for a long time before moving on to Europe, or play in Mexico for a long time before going back to South America. And now what's happening is MLS teams are getting, I would say, a lot of those players, maybe even a majority of those players at a younger age, and players that were high quality young players in Ecuador, Colombia, or Peru, Argentina. Instead of going to Mexico now, a lot of times they're going straight to the US. And that's where the quality difference has changed in MLS. MLS has adjusted its salary rules to allow more of those types of players. And then the American player has just gotten better over time with our MLS academies. Players have just gotten better. So the roster, as I was saying before, the roster in MLS teams is in most cases now better than Liga MX teams. And that's why you're seeing majority of the time now MLS teams are beating Liga MX teams.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the narrative Liga MX between MLS and the fact that they also love to hate each other. But from our side, and Geno and I talked about it prior, is the fact that this rivalry nurtures better football everywhere. And we're curious if you think that way as well.
There's no question. So for so many years, you can take the national team and then you can take the two leagues. With the national team, Mexico dominated for so many years. And then in the early 2000s, I know you like that.
Yeah, but hearing it from you is just so much better.
But in the early 2000s, the pendulum started to shift and we started to win quite a bit. And so what that did is made Mexico go, oh, we need to figure something out. So in the 2010s, Mexico put a huge emphasis on their youth national teams. And all of a sudden they were winning the under-17 World Cup, the under-20 World Cup, the Olympics. They were playing and progressing far into the Olympics, and it made their national team better. And then when that happens, we go, well, we have to do the same. And so that rivalry, that competition creates better all around. And then in the leagues, in Liga MX, for so long, so much better than MLS. And the gap started to close a little bit, but MLS teams, and mainly through Don Garber, the commissioner, just said, we're sick of losing to these teams. And so they spent more money, better facilities, better quality all around. And then MLS has started to get better and better. And now Liga MX is going to have to match it, right? Because you can't just keep losing. The final now this weekend is 2 MLS teams for Leagues Cup. And that's, Liga MX does not want to see that.
Now, I have to ask you, Landon, I mean, you've been mentioning roster rules a lot and how they have, kind of changed over time. I think that's a big conversation now, again, with Messi coming to the league. And now there's been a big talk about continuing those roster rule changes and continuing to allow these teams to bring in more players, more top quality players from outside of America. What's your thoughts on that? And does MLS need to continue to improve the roster rules to allow for the league to grow?
I think so, yeah. And in immense credit to Don and the owners, it's a fine line because in the 70s we had the NASL and the owners went and spent like crazy and the league folded, right? And so there was a balancing act for many years. How do you push the product and make it better and better, the quality on the field better and better, but not allow some owners to spend like crazy, which makes other owners want to spend like crazy, and then the league falls apart. So they've had to toe that line really delicately, and I think they've done a great job. The reality now is that every owner in MLS is a billionaire, right? And so they can afford whatever they want to afford. So I think you will see you'll see the chains continue to come off and owners continue to spend and spend and spend, and the league to continue to soften the rules so that people can spend more and more money. The reality for players around the world is, I always said this about players in other countries, they all want to play in America. All else being equal, they want to play in America. The quality of play wasn't high enough and the pay wasn't high enough. And now the pay is getting pretty close and the quality of the play is getting better and better. So you're going to see more and more players around the world start to say, hey, that's where I want to be.
And I know you have a special place in your heart for LA Galaxy, of course. But are there any teams in particular this season or recently that you've been impressed with?
Well, there's lots. I mean, what Inter Miami are doing right now is pretty spectacular. Nashville, a team that kind of goes under the radar, but what they've done there is really impressive. All the new teams in the league are so fun to watch because they've taken all the past mistakes and avoided those and taken all the best practices from all the other teams and made the most of it. Obviously, LAFC being probably the brightest example of that. So I just love watching the league now. I love watching the variety in styles of play, the variety in how teams build their rosters. There's real character to all the different teams in the league. And for someone like me who grew up in this league, it's fun to see it develop.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, St. Louis City, again, another great example of that this season, who's been, I think such a surprise, but it's coming to the point where these teams are, like you said, continuing to do this. Every time an expansion team comes into this league, it seems like they're surprising people, but yet they continue to compete for these playoff spots. A quick shift back to USA Mexico, obviously a rivalry you've played in multiple times as well, a rivalry we have on this podcast already between me and Lizzy. Tell us a little bit about your experiences there. What was your favorite moment about playing in that rivalry, and then the best part about having that rivalry here in America, something that maybe some other countries don't have, and I feel like it's extremely heated here, specifically in North America.
It is. For the longest time in my career, Major League Soccer was still in its infancy, and the games didn't feel what I would call real. They didn't always feel like a real game. There were some games along the way, a rivalry game when the Galaxy would play San Jose, or when Beckham came and there were certain games that just had more hype, but a lot of the games didn't feel like real soccer games. So every time we played Mexico with the national team, it was that opportunity to play in a real soccer game that had real meaning to everybody involved, real crowd, real atmosphere, real energy in the stadium. And so that I loved. And I think as a performer, as an athlete and an entertainer, that's something that you thrive on. I have lots of favorite moments. I think that the best, because of its historical context, is beating Mexico in the World Cup. Sorry, Lizzy.
It's okay.
Beating Mexico in the World Cup, because it is possible. I don't know if it's probable, but it is possible we never play them again in a World Cup.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to play a CONCACAF team in a group stage, so we can't play them in a group stage, although that could change, I guess, with it going to 48 teams, but probably not.
Wow.
And it's possible that we never play them again. So we historically, and for the rest of time, will say at least the first time we ever met, we beat them.
Fair point. Very fair point. Now, I mean, again, Mexico is not really the only team that's been at the top of the game here in North America now. Canada seems to be, fighting to come back in and build these rivalries with the U.S. and the Mexico, and starting to make a stake for being one of the better teams in CONCACAF. As CONCACAF continues to grow here, how do you see it? What's the future of CONCACAF and this, part of the world and CONCACAF teams, and specifically, I guess, the top three, Canada, Mexico, and the United States, as they continue to work on, dominating this part of the world?
I'm half Canadian, so I do get pride in watching Canada do well, and I enjoyed watching them at the World Cup too. I think the World Cup going to 48 teams is a complete game changer for all smaller countries around the world, but in particular in our part of the world for CONCACAF teams. So going into the next World Cup, for example, Mexico, US, Canada automatically qualify, but then you have, I'm not sure if it's 3, 4, 5 other teams who will have the opportunity to play in a World Cup. And I think it might be almost guaranteed that one of those teams are going to the World Cup for the first time. So if it's not Panama or Costa Rica or Jamaica, I think, I'm not sure on Trinidad, but one likely team will go to the World Cup for the first time at least, which is a total game changer financially for their federations, what it means to all their kids watching back home and how that inspires young people back home in one of those countries. And so I think the expansion of the World Cup will be really, really good for the smaller countries in this region.
Yeah, and we're seeing it now, Panama, who's featured in the first Women's World Cup ever, and although they didn't make it quite far, the impact, and speaking to some of these players, the impact they've had on their country, on women's football in that space. And the same will be true for men's soccer, whoever does end up qualifying. Now, before we get to the final predictions, Landon, you mentioned the arrival of Beckham to MLS and there being a shift. Obviously, the arrival of Messi is compared to that, but from your perspective, having lived both, do you think Messi's arrival was kind of a larger shift, or will have the same impact that Beckham's arrival did?
It's hard to say for sure, and it's hard to quantify how one could be bigger than the other. At the time, I had never seen, because I was not exposed to it, I had never seen a bigger star in the world than David. And when he came to our team, it was way beyond soccer. And people from all walks of life, when we would go through the airport, it was like Michael Jackson walking through the airport, right? I mean, you could not believe how famous he was and how recognizable he was to everybody. Lionel Messi, certainly in a sporting context, has that same level of fame. What's really impressive right now about him, and I'll be honest, I expected him to do well. I was not expecting him to come out of the gate and do this. I thought it would take him time to adjust to the travel, to the heat, to his new teammates, to a new environment. And he's just taken it in stride. And it has shown me the difference in quality between maybe the best player ever and really, really, really top-end professionals. And to be at that level and make it look that easy against some of the best players in the world, previously at Barcelona with Argentina, now in MLS. It's so impressive, and at his age. And he's taken it in stride, and it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, it's been wild. I feel like every time we watch a game, 3 minutes in, he's got the ball in the back of the net, and it's just it's been crazy. And like you said, I think everybody expected him to be good. He's Messi. He's widely regarded as one of the best players ever, if not the best player ever. So you expected him to come in here and be Messi, but to do it this way has been truly unbelievable. But Lizzy, what do you say we get to?
Is no joke. It is
Yes.
so hot here. I live in Miami. I'm here all the time, and I can barely go on a walk. I really don't know how he's doing it with the humidity in Fort Lauderdale. So
it's impressive.
Yeah, like a feat of its own.
All right, what do you say we get to Paquito predictions here, Lizzy?
Yeah, let's do it. So in a bit, you're going to be watching AT&T Paquito's Predicts, a game-changing new way to experience Leagues Cup with our fortune-telling Pajarito and predictions at each stage that's made possible by connecting with AT&T. Let's do it. We have the final on Saturday, Nashville against Inter Miami at Geodis Park in Nashville. Obviously, we know it's home to Nashville because of the positions in the table last season. We know Inter Miami did not do well, but it was prior to the Messi era, which now they've had 7 consecutive victories, which is absolutely unreal. 8 or 9 goals for Messi in the past 5 games, also unreal. And before we get into our own opinions, let's see what Paquito says about the final.
All right.
It'll be interesting.
Paquito.
Right off the bat.
That was a quick one. That's one of the quickest ones we've had. He's made no mistake of that one.
Landon, would you agree?
I mean, how could you possibly bet? Even Paquito knows that Lionel Messi is an absolute GOAT. And so how could you possibly pick against Lionel? I mean, you don't have to be a human. You can be a bird to figure that out. So I agree. I think Inter Miami finds a way to win. It's going to be a really, really, really great game.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to point out here, we had Marcelo on last week. He's an Inter Miami fan. We had Walker Zimmerman on at the beginning of the podcast when we started bringing on guests. So a little bit of love towards the Real Football Show. Maybe there's a little bit going on there. Maybe we got maybe we got a little good luck for people coming on. But it's definitely going to be a great match. Nashville's a great city, and it's a great soccer city. They've shown that with their new stadium and whatnot. So it's going to be phenomenal and a great environment for both of them. And I think both of them are going for their first trophy. So that's also really, really awesome as well. So what do we say? We move on to fortunes next, right, Lizzy?
Yep. And these are Landon from Paquito directly.
Oh.
All right. A lot more to choose from here. Wow, he's been... I mean, what happened? I go away for 1 week. He's got his mind made up already. All right, what's this one? Stay focused on the goal, both on and off the field, and you will achieve greatness. Landon, your thoughts on this fortune you?
What a wise little bird Paquito is, huh? I got to stay focused on the goal. Now, unfortunately, it's off the field because I can barely walk anymore. But I'm going to stay focused on the goal off the field. And for you, Geno, off the field is a baby, right? You got to stay focused on that goal. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult way. It's been a difficult first week, but yeah, definitely staying focused on the goal for sure. We have another do we have one more? We have one more fortune for you, Landon.
One more,
let's see. Maybe it'll have something to do with
immense wisdom.
All right. Flow with the course of the game and your team rather than insist that they follow with you.
Flow with you. That's funny. Okay, so flow with the course of the game rather than insist that they flow with you. Wow, this is very wise. Where does Paquito learn these?
I don't know. I mean, this is more wise than I think I've ever been in my entire life.
One thing I was going to say about Leagues Cup, what's cool about this is that when a new tournament starts, it doesn't have any history, obviously, and there's no tradition history. So when it started, I think a lot of us were kind of wondering, how would people take to this? Would they be excited about it? But I think the way it's been formatted has made it actually really exciting to watch. And you didn't know what you were going to get anywhere along the way. You didn't know what the matchups were going to be. There was obviously a lot of Mexican versus US matchups, but in the end, it's been a really dramatic, fun tournament. And I thought it would take years and years and years for people to actually really get into it and excited about it, but it's happened right away. I mean, even Paquito's excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, you've even seen it with the League MX teams and the MLS teams, the fans. They've been very into this tournament, more than they've been for other tournaments, say the US Open Cup or even CONCACAF Champions League. And getting fans out to the stadium on weekdays is a massive thing, I think, for the MLS because, it's getting fans out on work nights, school nights, and whatnot to be able to watch the sport. So definitely a really big step for the Leagues Cup and, excited to see, obviously the final, but to see what it brings in the coming years for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be cool.
Yeah, and even when the controversy, I know there's been a lot of talk on Liga MX side about the travel and the little complications that's been on that end, but even seeing fans get so protective over their teams or protective over the nuances, you really don't get that quickly. And so I don't know, I'm excited to see where this goes. I think there'll be some changes next year, but I don't think there'll be a decline in intensity. I think it's on its way up always.
Yeah, agreed.
For sure. Any last things here, Lizzie, we got to touch on with Landon?
Yeah, predictions.
Score. Of course. Forgot. How could I forget?
But
right.
Score.
And I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Lionel Messi is gonna score. Let's say 2-1 Inter Miami. There's definitely goals in this game.
Yeah.
There you go. That's there it is. I mean, that's another Leo Messi goal. Inter Miami continuing their hot streak. I think that's a fair shout. I can't imagine there's many people that would disagree with you on that one, the way they've been playing. So Lizzie, who do you have? You got Inter Miami or Nashville?
No, Inter Miami. I think Hany Mukhtar definitely stuns. He had a phenomenal, unfortunately disallowed goal yesterday. I think he stuns, but I'm going for a 3-1 Inter Miami.
I can't go against Nashville. It's like my favorite city on the planet. So I love Nashville so much. So I'm going to stick with Walker Zimmerman. Yeah, I'm going to stick with Walker Zimmerman and the boys in Nashville, and we'll see how it plays out. Just to be different, too. Come on, we can't have 3 Inter Miamis on the show. So.
Fair enough.
Going against Paquito. Let's see how wise that is.
And I don't think it's worked out for us already. So, all right.
Thank you so much, Landon. That was so insightful and so wonderful. Geno, we're happy to have you back. And thanks for listening to the Real Football Show.
Thank you guys very much, Geno. Congrats. And Lizzie, thank you. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much, Landon. All right.